I mean, obviously, Marin, you've been such a champion of bringing attention to music that the rest of us don't know about. I mean, you've done that your whole career. Um, are you still doing that in Vienna, or is there kind of an appetite for, we need to hear our Mahler every year, and we need to hear our Brahms and our Bruckner? How does that work for you?
Well, that's such a wonderful question because I think part of the draw for me about the Radio Symphony Orchestra that here in Vienna was the repertoire because they play a lot of contemporary music, but it's not the contemporary music that I've been championing. So I'm getting to know all of these European composers, lots of Austrian composers, and a whole. For me as an artist, this is what's exciting. And I think you agree because your career is similar. That the more we can explore and expand our artistic vision, the healthier we are as artists. So here it's fascinating because as a radio orchestra, we get to play a lot of new music. So lots of crazy things here.
That's nice. So you're encountering composers you've never heard of.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, without a doubt. And not just contemporary composers, people like Hans Roth and, composers that I wouldn't have been familiar with at all. And and so it's fun for me. And it was the same when I went to Brazil, getting to know all of these South American Brazilian composers. I mean, it was like a treasure chest, that's what it feels like for me each time. And then I get to explore all these different corners of the world. And I think that for me, that then informs my, Beethoven and my Brahms. Don't you find the more new music you play, the more insight you get into the old music too?
The more new music I play, the more I realize that it's really hard to compose anything.
Yeah. Okay. I'm totally on board with you because my respect for composers is it was always very high, but working on so many new works, I'm in awe. I really am. I wish I could compose. I mean, that would be a dream come true, but boy, I've tried and I have so little talent. It's unbelievable. But I agree 100%. Wow.
I find that um, when you look at composers today, they're shackled by Beethoven was sitting on the shoulders of Brahms like an albatross.
Mhm.
I feel like any composer who's living today has 300 years of history weighing them down. He or she, and
Yeah.
it feels like it's kind of unreasonable that somebody writing a string quartet today has to somehow outdo Beethoven or Bartok or Schubert. It's just,
No, it's true. It's
people
it's
should
a
be free to
daunting.
write. It's daunting. Exactly.
It is
It's really.
daunting. I think that I mean, but can you imagine being an author and going to write a novel? I mean, with the volume and the quality of work out there, I mean, it is overwhelming. I think the trick really is to try to find your voice, right? And your authentic self. That's what appeals to me always about composers, new composers, that they have something that feels authentic to them. And it doesn't have to be original. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. It just has to be authentic and it has to be from the heart because ultimately we want music to move people and that's really our only goal, our only objective. I mean, I'm really curious, Scott. Like, I'm the child of two professional musicians, so I had no choice about playing the violin or playing the piano when I was little. How did you start playing the violin?
So my father was an immigrant from South Korea, going to university here, and he grew up listening to a lot of Heifetz records.
Oh wow!
And so, and my
So no
mother,
pressure. You had to sound like Heifetz, right? That was the
well,
goal.
I mean, you might as well imitate the best. My mother heard and this goes to show you how important these youth concerts are. My mother, as a young girl, heard Masako Ushioda, who is a was a wonderful violin teacher at the New England Conservatory, play a recital at her school, and
Wow.
thought, I really like the sound of that. I'd like for my child to play that, whatever that is. And so
Wow.
between the two of them, I started playing the violin, and I don't know. I often think about what would have happened if I had started playing the trombone, or the flute, or I mean, how different life would have turned out. I mean, being a violinist, don't you feel like having a background as a violinist, Marin, it kind of shapes who you are, not just what kind of a conductor you are, but who you are as a person, right? I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
you
Yeah.
played first violin parts in string quartets. You were used to leading
Yeah.
as a teenager or even younger, so you already knew how to do that, right? What if you had grown up being a
Yeah.
violist? How would that have changed you as a person?
Oh, but there's so many good viola jokes in there that I could think of. Well, but I I do think that being a string player, period, is a is a huge advantage as a conductor, because of course we can relate and speak to the majority of the orchestra. And I think the physicality of playing a string instrument also is conducive to the transition to becoming a conductor. Just the natural motion that we use as string players. Um, and I think there is a definite bossy quality, especially about violinists. Maybe if had been a violist, I loved playing viola actually quite a bit, but I think perhaps I'd be more collaborative. But
That's
uh,
interesting.
I don't know. I do think that did you always want to conduct, Scott, or was that something later in your life?
No, it was when I was in high school. I got the opportunity to um, play with the orchestra of St. Luke's, and Zuckerman Pinka Zuckerman was
Mm,
conducting. I'm sure you've played dozens of
many
concerts
times,
with
yeah.
him, and I was really excited about it. And then he said, you know what? It was a Bach concerto, and he said, Scott, why don't you just play conduct the thing yourself? And I'd never done that. And
Wow.
at some point, like, I just bent down because the orchestra was a little loud, and they just went. And I thought, oh my God, this is it's just a really strange thing that you move your body and then suddenly the sound changes. It's like this kind of whole body theremin or something. There's something
Oh,
so
wow,
strange
yeah.
about it.
Right, right.
And so
No.
I was hooked, at that point. How did you get your start? Because you started really young. You were kind of very, very
Well,
young, right?
it's a good thing I started young, right? Because it took a long time to get well, as anything, it's the strange phenomenon of being quite expert in one area, and then suddenly you're an amateur, you're a beginner, in when you step on the podium, and how do you gain experience? I mean, that's such a tricky catch 22. But I always wanted to conduct. I mean, from the time I was about 9 years old and I saw Bernstein at a young people's concert again, how important these concerts are for kids, because you have no idea what, you know, what you're bringing out in a child. So I find them so valuable. But yeah, it was for me, it was a matter of really just biding my time until I got tall enough and could talk people into playing with me. And of course, I just did it because I loved it. Absolutely no other reason. And I do feel that conducting is in a way about connecting with people and connecting with a lot of people at once, and also being the conduit to enable people to be the best they can be. And those things really appeal to me in life. So I feel I'm sure we're on the same page in feeling extremely extremely fortunate to do what we do. And not
So
only do what
interesting.
we do, but get paid for doing what we do.
Oh my God.
Unbelievable.
It's interesting to hear you talk about conducting. I mean, obviously you're one of the more eloquent conductors maybe ever.
Oh,
But
thank you.
um, what the way you describe the field, um, if you stripped out the music part of that, you could think that this is somebody talking about leading a
Mhm.
an army or leading a corporation. I mean, when you talk about leadership, there are certain things, or leading a baseball team for that matter. I mean,
Oh, for
there are
sure.
certain there are certain things that are universal in the human experience, and conducting is just the sort of the extreme musical example of that. But this is something that carries across to being the coach of a high school lacrosse team. I mean, motivating people and getting them to see it your way. And isn't that interesting?
No, absolutely. And I think that, it's an interesting question because sometimes people will say, well, what really does a conductor do? And after I say, gosh, I'm not really sure, no, but it's so abstract. It's really about leadership, as you said. It's about it's about motivating people and hopefully inspiring them in different ways. The great thing, though, about conducting, which you don't find in something like leading a corporation, is that we have this incredible vehicle that is transformational of the music. We have the music that we're serving. So we're not only getting that thrill of leading and motivating people, but we actually are in the service of great beauty as well. So for me, it's sort of the best of all possible combinations of things.
Right, absolutely. You know it's so interesting to hear the same orchestra perform under different leaders,
Oh yeah.
how different they can sound. I think this is something that maybe the general public, we sometimes forget that person up there, whether it be Marin Alsop or someone else, changes how that orchestra sounds, even without saying a word. Isn't that strange?
This is true, and I think that if any member of the public, non-musical, not musically educated necessarily, came to, say, a conducting seminar and watched five young conductors conduct the same orchestra, the same piece, any one of them would be able to hear the difference because there's a physical reaction that people have. It's like the way you react to someone shaking hands with you. You're forming an opinion, you're having a reaction, you're thinking, oh, I want to know this person. Oh, I don't want to know this person. Oh,
Mm,
that person seems nice. All these things are going on. And that's exactly what it's like when a conductor stands up. I mean, they're all unconscious reactions, but I've seen a young conductor stand up and not literally put their hands on the orchestra, but sort of metaphorically put their hands on the orchestra, and the most gorgeous sound comes out, or
mm,
the harshest sound comes out. And it's just absolutely fascinating to me because it's all about human interaction, and conducting is really a metaphor for who we are as human beings, and that's what comes across. So I don't know, it's fascinating to me, and it's so multidimensional. We have to be doing so many things. I'm a multitasker at heart. Anyway, I don't know if you are too. Do you have like 17 devices going? And I like doing a lot of things at once. So conducting is perfect for me.
Marin, that famous picture of you with Bernstein,
Yeah.
when was that taken? Like, how old were you?
Oh, I must have been just 30, I think. So, but I hope I look younger. The
Oh, so that was 12
Yeah,
years
just a
ago.
couple of years ago. There you go.
Yeah. So
And
what did he what do you remember most about your time with him?
oh, I remember almost every minute with him as though
Mm,
it's like I could play it back as a slow motion memory. But the things I remember, of course, talking about music a lot and how passionate he was about our responsibility as conductors to be the messenger for the composer. That's our only responsibility, our number one responsibility, I should say, not our only responsibility. And
Do you feel like
that
he was talking almost as a composer's advocate, being a composer himself?
I'm sure on every level.
Hmm.
But I loved when he conducted his own music, he'd stop and say, "Oh, who wrote that? That's too hard." I
Hmm.
always enjoyed that. And I also think that Bernstein was a wonderful and probably one of the greatest storytellers of all time. And he really impressed upon me that every piece of music is about storytelling. It has to have that narrative. And finally, I think this is just something I took away. I really, I really admired his the way he lived his life in the world as a citizen of the world. You know, he would stand up for things he believed in, whether I agreed with him or not. I admired that ability to take a stand and to be there and be counted and be a defender of principles. And so I really loved that about him. And hopefully I've been able to lead my life with that as an example.
Do you find yourself repeating some of the things he told you now that you are the eminence grise, that you are passing, you're passing that on to the youngsters?
Oh yes, sure. I mean, I'm always, sharing things that he said. I mean, I always give him credit, of course, because I don't want him to be mad at me still. Um, uh, so, and so many of the little things he said just come back in that moment of teaching. And I think that teaching and learning are so close to each other that I know that Bernstein adored teaching. And I think he adored teaching because he loved learning. So
Mm,
that's something that I see every day.
mm. Do you do a lot of teaching? I mean, you're kind of going back and forth. So you spend a lot of time on an airplane.
I do, and I've been teaching the flight attendants. No, I'm just kidding. I I am the head of the conducting department at Peabody, which is a wonderful conservatory in Baltimore, and uh, I have a class of 11 students, and I actually was just teaching them today from Vienna on Zoom. The
Nice.
pandemic kind of got us into a new way of being able to be present. But I'll be back next week and be with
Nice.
them. So it works out pretty well for me. And of course, I try to do master classes. I just as you do. I think we want to give back, don't we? I mean, what's the point of having such a great life if you can't share it?
So I remember reading an interview with von Karajan, and he said, "What is conducting about?" And he said, "It's about having the patience to tell a group of people the same thing over and over and over again." And my question to you is, what is the thing that you tell your students over and over and over and over?
I always say, if it's too musical, I'll let you know. I mean, I think that's the
Oh, that's awesome.
That's the danger, right? Is that people always hold back because that's the nature of who we are as human beings. Don't
It's
hold
safer.
back.
It's
It's
safer
safer. It's
because you're
safer.
not
Take a
vulnerable.
chance. Right. Take a chance. If it's too much, I'll let you know. And so far, I haven't had to let anyone know. So I think that's a but yeah, it's pretty it's really joyful though to teach. And are you able to do a lot of teaching?
I don't. In the summers at a festival that I teach at in Colorado, we have two assistants usually, although during the pandemic we just had one. And
Hmm.
they get to stand in front of the orchestra a lot because there's a lot of stuff going on. And usually what happens is they get intimidated because all of all the members of the orchestra are their friends that they're living with, and they
Oh,
don't want to mess
yeah.
up. And
Yeah.
they start, you can kind of see that they start following the orchestra rather than leading the orchestra, and the
Right.
orchestra keeps slowing
Right.
down. And
Right.
you got to just go out there and do it.
Yeah.
You can't just be differential. You have to go out there and do it. And I don't know. I mean, you've seen far more young conductors than I have. I imagine you've seen that trend too, where the kids are, they just become suddenly passive. The orchestra doesn't know what to do, so everything starts sort of grinding to a halt.
Right.
And
Right.
then they get frustrated, and then they start beating way too far ahead, and then they've lost contact with the orchestra.
Right. I mean, I think the most important thing is to, as you say, stay connected, especially to the sound, and remember that you're leading, not following.
Right.
I always tell my students, you have to hear everything, but listen to nothing. So that because as soon as you start listening, it's a reactive action rather than a leading
Right.
action. So
And to
they're
your
doing pretty
students,
well.
I think that's a great, easy to understand, yet in some ways esoteric point,
Hmm.
to listen to everything and listen to nothing at the same time. Do your students get that?
I think they do, but it takes a little bit of time. As you say, they get in front of a big orchestra and either they're overwhelmed, they can't hear anything because it's so much information coming at them, or they're waiting.
Hmm.
They're constantly waiting for the orchestra. And that's where I say, look, you have to hear everything, but don't listen. Move forward, keep moving.
Right.
And music has to have motion. Without pulse, without motion, it just doesn't live.
Right.
So, but this is so much fun that we're both on this program together and this series, isn't it?
Well,
I haven't seen you in a long time. Gosh.
I I told somebody that I was going to have this Zoom call with Marin Alsop, and you know th- they said, well, do you guys hang out? And I was reminding my friend that conductors actually don't usually see each other, because when you're in town, they're not, and vice versa. I
Right.
mean, that's the whole point, is that everybody gets sort of shuffles in and out. It's not like being a um, let's say an oboist, and doing a guest week with an orchestra. You don't really have colleagues in an odd way.
Yeah, it's
It's
strange. I don't know if you found during the pandemic something one of the byproducts that I absolutely have enjoyed so much is that I've done a lot of talks and panels with other conductors and been able to hang out. And, that was something I never had the luxury to do that. And,
was that
you know, what-
tell me about your pandemic experience, Marin. I mean, do you feel
yeah,
like I mean, what happened, and when did you get shut down, and where were you, and what happened? What
yeah,
did you do?
I was in the middle of Mahler 3, just at the dress rehearsal. And I said, it was in Baltimore. And I said, you might want to film this because I don't think we're going to, oh no, we'll have a concert. And of course, that was the end. And it was so shocking. But everyone was in the same boat. Everything just disappeared, was canceled, and all of my conducting weeks. And then uh, pretty soon, my final season as music director in Baltimore was completely canceled. So that was that. It was so strange. Um, but you know, for me, I'm fortunate in that, you know, I I really was able to use the time to spend with my family. Our son was about to enter his final year of high school, so we
Nice.
were able to so you know what I did? I said, "Oh, we just can't sit in this house forever, that
Mm.
we're gonna go crazy or drive each other crazy." I said, "Let's rent an RV and just start driving." So we went early in the pandemic and rented an RV. And I don't know if you've ever driven an RV. It's like driving a house and a boat at the same time. It's crazy. But we drove across the United States, and we
No
had our own
kidding.
sort
Good
of
for you.
self-contained. Yeah, and it was probably the most wonderful trip we ever took. I mean, there was
So
nobody was out. We went all the
where'd
way
you
to
go?
Yellowstone. We went
How
all the
was
way to
that?
Montana. Oh, fantastic. I mean, really amazing. And also having some deep quality time. I think because as conductors, as musicians who travel so much, you lose touch with your what's really important in life, I think. And so I was very fortunate. And then we decided to come to Vienna and set up house here because I
Mm.
could work with the orchestra because it's a radio orchestra. We could do recording. And so I got to know my new orchestra very well, which was really nice. Um, so, I mean, of course, I tried to spend a lot of time with young conductors online because I felt so terrible for them. I mean, so many of them just starting their careers, and then all the debut weeks canceled and all this canceled and 90% of their income gone, all these things. I mean, we who are a little bit older can withstand that, but these young, didn't you feel terrible for, oh gosh, it was so
Anybody
heartbreaking.
who was a freelancer, I felt like
I know.
just decimated. And I heard about stories of some of my friends. They were actually on, on government assistance and everything, and just sort of unthinkable and just
Mhm.
tragic things. Um,
And what
I
did
mean,
you do during the pandemic? Where were you
so
when it hit?
I was, well, I don't know if I was one of the first COVID patients or not.
Oh
I
my
was, I,
gosh.
we were doing a week in Mexico City, and I could not stop coughing.
Oh
I mean,
wow.
just I could not stop coughing, but it wasn't, and this is what spooked me, it wasn't a quote productive cough. So, usually when I cough a lot, there's something that will happen just
Right.
physiologically, and you get a tissue and you move
Mhm.
on. But this was just a dry hacking cough that would not stop
Oh
for
wow.
weeks.
Mm.
And I came home and I had a couple of weeks off, and then I was supposed to go out again. And somebody said, I think they're going to close the border. We're not going to be able to get
Wow.
out of the country. And sure enough, all of my weeks from March to June were canceled. I had this weird thing that happened. So my wife and I were trying to buy a house, and the only day that I could close on that house was May 5th, 2020. So we set the date, the closing date of May 5th. And I told my wife, the way I'm living my life almost feels unsustainable, because I mean, I'm not going to be home. I'm going to be home for one day between the beginning of March and June 28th or something like that.
Right.
I
There
thought,
you go.
how am I going to keep doing this? I need for the world to stop for 6 months
Oh,
so I can
so it's
catch up.
your fault. See, that's what happened. You wished for it, and that's what happened.
And then suddenly the world stopped.
Yeah.
And so what I did was I pretended that all those concerts I had were happening, and I prepared for all of them the way I wanted to, and I kind of caught up. I developed an arm problem because I was spending so much time with a red pencil in my hand in front of a score,
Mhm.
and I was spending so much time at the computer. So I ended up buying this mouse, it's a mouse that works like this rather than like this. It's a
Oh, how
vertical
cool.
mouse,
Uh-huh.
and that's helped quite a bit.
Hmm.
And my wife and I, we got married in 2014, and we spent more time together in 2020 than we ever in our relationship. And so I feel ashamed and embarrassed that it was actually kind of a nice period for me, even though that just sounds so sort of dripping with privilege and awful. But it was
No, I
it was a,
know.
it was a respite, and I feel bad about that. But that's how it worked
No,
out for
I
me.
I agree. I think I had the same reaction. I'm curious, do you see any changes in the industry since COVID?
I,
What are you
I
seeing?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like people uh, at least domestically, people have been coming to concerts. Well, maybe the Omicron period aside, people have been coming to concerts in droves because people feel that they realize and were reminded that going to a concert is a gift. It's not
It's
something to be
true.
taken
It's
advantage of. It can be
true.
taken away.
I see people enjoying concert experience and the gathering of humanity much more now, don't you?
Do you feel that? So, did you have experience with your Vienna orchestra before? Um, did you have enough of a sample size before March of 2020 that you could feel a before and an after?
Not so much in Vienna, but certainly in Baltimore. And I go back and do several weeks every year. And every time I go back, it feels like a just a celebration,
Mm.
you know, and that is a beautiful thing. I think there are many lessons, but maybe the most important thing is that people realign their priorities and they're able to appreciate things more and value things that aren't necessarily consumer goods, or they're not driven by capitalism, but driven really by the soul. And so I think that's why we're having this experience, which is great. And I'm so excited that both of our shows will be on great performances. It's really exciting.
Well, I can't wait to see the conductor. I think that's going to be
Oh,
really
thank you.
fascinating. I mean, following your life and um, what how many different lives you've lived, Marin, in your
A
brief
few.
time on Earth. You've lived a few lives,
I have.
and being such a trailblazer on multiple fronts, not just being a woman in a male-dominated field, but just as a champion of all things new and shaking up the industry.
Thank you.
I think it's going to be fascinating.
Well, thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing yours too. It's really a privilege and so nice to connect with you again, reconnect with you.